pleasant good morning to members of the Small Business Association, colleagues and friends all. Welcome to this month's members information session. This is the month of June, and we are here today to talk about mitigating the risk of natural disasters, preparing for the storm. I'm sure that all of you on this call from the Caribbean region will appreciate that it is at this time when all of our attention is focused on the season of what we know to be the Atlantic hurricane season, and preparing ourselves for what could possibly happen relative to natural disasters. This is the last month in June. As you know, they say June too soon. And we thought it fitting to come at this time with our monthly webinar focusing on this topic. Now, we can all appreciate that natural disasters have become very, very, very common to us on this side of the Atlantic, as they say. And within recent years, we've been seeing some intensification, if you will, of the storms and hurricanes that have been, passing through this region. And each year, around this time, the association focuses on this topic, not as just a cliche, but in a very serious way, trying to challenge our members to pay attention to this time, do whatever they need to do to prepare, to mitigate the risk of a natural disaster, and to put in place the systems needed to be able to withstand the impact from a storm on their businesses, obviously on their lives. So, it is indeed a pleasure to have you with us today as we continue this conversation on mitigating the risk of natural disasters. Now, for those of you who may be new to this process, we are going to have a presentation today from our invited guests, and immediately thereafter, you'll hear from one of our members in a very short advert promoting the particular product offering. And thereafter, we go into our question and answer segment. And at the end of it, we'll ask you if you have the time, please give us an extra 5 to 7 minutes, as we are going to ask you to complete a very short evaluation tool on this particular webinar. These surveys help us to improve our product offering for you, our stakeholders, on a monthly basis. This is a part of our monthly webinar series. Members would recall that prior to the onslaught of COVID, this particular event was held in person right here in the Secretariat or another location, where we would, focus in on a topical issue, an educational issue to help, strengthen our members and their operations. Obviously, because of COVID, we've had to move to this particular platform, the Zoom platform, but still, I can assure you of the quality of the production and the type of topics that they are relevant to your business operation. So without any further ado, colleagues, let me welcome you to this month's webinar, and to introduce our speakers, our presenters today. We have with us our colleagues from the Insurance Corporation of Barbados Limited, ICBL, Ms. Maya Wiltshire, and Mr. Mitchell Blades. Now, before they come on, let me just share a little bit about our presenters today. Ms. Wiltshire has over 20 years in the business-to-business environment and has advised organizations in various sectors regarding risk mitigation, business development, and business continuity to ensure the right solutions are in place to protect their organizations. Maya is currently the Vice President of Commercial Sales and Broker Engagement at ICBL, which is responsible for the government and commercial teams, which provides services to MSMEs, large enterprises, and the government, both directly and through brokers. Ms. Wiltshire has an enthusiastic commitment for driving positive outcomes in business and seeing those businesses thrive. She holds an MBA in Marketing and Sales Management from the University of Edinburgh, Napier, and a Bachelor in Linguistics and Management Studies from the University of the West Indies. So we're going to have Ms. Maya Wiltshire to begin our presentation today, but she's accompanied by Mr. Mitchell Robin Blades. He is a commercial sales and business development specialist, having 25 years of experience within the insurance sector. Mitchell has extensive knowledge and experience with commercial insurance coverage. He works with clients to identify needs and perform market surveys to determine the adequacy of their coverage and the type of coverage required. He's also a valuer. His mission is to make sure that the client knows their total risk exposure and advise them of the best coverage to mitigate any losses. Mitchell is a Justice of the Peace for Barbados and has a designation of Associate in Customer Service under the LOMA FLMI program. I'm sure he'll tell us what those acronyms mean a little later on. Colleagues, you could remember that in the past, we've tended to invite persons from our disaster management departments, either here in Barbados or regionally, but we thought today we would introduce our colleagues from the insurance sector, because we really want to talk about how we can mitigate the risk. And one, I'm sure, way to mitigating risk is having adequate insurance coverage. So let us introduce now our presenters, and let's hear from them as we look to mitigate the risk of natural disasters and prepare for any pending storms, especially in this 2022 Atlantic hurricane season. So let's welcome Ms. Wiltshire at this time to lead off our presentations. Go right ahead, Maya.
Good morning, and thank you for the warm welcome, Dr. Holder. It is indeed a pleasure to be here with the SBA this morning to share in terms of our presentation from ICBL. I hope that you guys are seeing the screen okay and that you are also hearing me well.
Yes, both. Yes to both. Go right ahead.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So this topic, the topic this morning, we know is mitigating the risk of natural disasters and preparing for the storm. And this is such a critical time for us to look at this topic. And I really applaud the SBA for taking the leap and the lead in terms of this particular initiative to ensure that our MSMEs understand the seasons that we are in and that you are prepared for that season. And we know that our micro, small, and medium enterprises play a major role. They play many roles in our community, circulating money and resources into the local economy, affecting local culture, influencing the quality of life for their employees. And your strategy for dealing with natural disaster will depend on your unique business operations, your assets, and your needs. So as I go through this morning, I want you to keep that in mind because every business will be unique. However, there are some core stages that every business should address when developing a natural disaster preparedness plan. So there are some key considerations to reduce risks. Firstly, we're going to look at monitoring the forecast closely. And that would have been, we would have seen that impact for those of you based in Barbados. You would have seen that impact this week. Only this week where we had to keep our eyes closely on the weather systems. And I want to encourage you to use credible sources. So use the DEM, Dr. Holder would have mentioned it earlier that they were already on board before. And you want to ensure that you're not following WhatsApps that might not be credible sources and certain things that are posted on social media. Another key thing is updating your employee contact list. Now, this is important not only for your internal employee contact list, but it is also important for the essential services that you work with. So you want to ensure that the persons that you engage, your suppliers, that they have the right person's contact information that is updated. Those persons are still within your organization and that they have their mobile numbers in the event of a disaster happening. The building infrastructure being protected from the elements, that is critical. certain areas you have to know, you have to look at your shutters. I'm sure that Mitchell is going to speak a bit about that. You have to look at your shutters, you have to look at boarding up and those things, checking for drainage. And whether you are renting a building or you are the owner of the building. Because I know sometimes for SMEs, you may be renting and you may be saying, you know what, but I'm renting, this is the landlord's issue. But your property, your assets are within that building. So you need to ensure that these things are checked and bring it to the landlord's attention as well. Don't just say it's not my building. If anything happened, they'll take care of it, right? Then the vehicles and mobile equipment, that they are in safe locations. And by mobile equipment, I do not mean your mobile phones, but I mean the equipment that you need to utilize. So if you're a nail technician and you're on this morning, you know that you use nail drills and there are particular things that you will utilize that if they are damaged by water, that will stop them from working. So you don't want to keep them on the floor. There are particular things that you might utilize in terms of your electrical equipment, and you want to make sure that that is elevated and that these things are kept in a safe location. Emergency generators and fuel tanks are filled. And I want to plug in here, not only filled before the disaster, but even afterwards, you refill. So if you utilize them, then you refill. Fire protection equipment is operational. And this is key. Things like your smoke detectors, things like your fire extinguishers. These things need to be serviced, especially your fire extinguishers. You need to make sure you check on these things and not wait until something happens, go to utilize it and recognize, but it was not working. And in the event of a natural disaster, yes, certain things can happen that affects the power lines, that can cause fire. So we want to ensure and encourage you to make sure that your smoke detectors, your alarm, your smoke detectors and your fire extinguishers, that they are functional. Important records are protected. And for our SMEs, I'm talking about things like your certificates of incorporation, things like your registration files, your legal files. Make sure that those things are protected. We know that it's not easy sometimes to get another document drafted. So you want to make sure you also duplicate and also store offsite where needed. And for offsite storage, you can look at things like cloud solutions. And there's so many options when you start looking at clouds as an SME. You have Google Clouds, there are free options. There's Dropbox as well. So based on the size of your organization, you don't have to look at investing a large amount of capital to get storage offsite. But there are options there that you can utilize. There's Amazon as well. So I want you to look at these things as you look at protecting and keeping these documents not only filed in a location, but also having a soft copy. Shut down the production processes safely and turn off power for non-critical equipment. And you would recognize this in most offices, what happens when we are preparing and we recognize that we may be impacted. We cover that equipment, whether it's your printers, your laptops, your desktops. And I know this is not new information to most of you. However, sometimes we take these things for granted. So I just want to enforce now, especially based on the season that we're in, that you are taking the necessary precautions to ensure that you protect the equipment. And then obviously shutting down any flammable liquids, combustible liquids and gas lines. So things like your natural gas, if you're a restaurant owner, you operate any type of business where you know that that kitchen is using your natural gas or regular bottled gas, make sure you shut the valves off when you're leaving, when you're finishing the day, and when you shut down the operations. Now, in terms of contingency planning is key. And it's important that we have these plans in place and we know these plans before natural disaster occurs. So planning of evacuation routes. And I have here in black brackets the closing times. And again, this week we would have recognized that we needed to take some actions and we needed to do them quickly. That the government would have issued a timeline that the country was going to be closing, which meant that the bus system was no longer going to be available after a particular time. Now, for SMEs, sometimes we don't have the luxury. You might not have that luxury of closing after 3:30, especially based on the services that you provide. If you're providing an essential service and you're in a community and you are providing food, we know that one of the first things sometimes persons look to get out and get some food. And you might not be able to close at 3:30, but realistically looking at the updates and following the forecast, you need to make a decision then in terms of what will be your closing time and how soon you close, your employees then would be able to get home. So it might mean that you might need to have a shuttle available for your employees because they might not be able to get the public transport if you decide to close at a 5:30 and the bus system ends at 6:30 based on their addresses and where they're going to. So these are things that even as small businesses, once you have employees, you need to also consider in terms of your contingency planning. The installation of emergency equipment. Now, during this period, there may be things that you utilize that you know you can have an alternative, whether it's battery operated equipment. I would have given the example of a nail technician earlier, and I will stay on that example. Power sometimes goes out more oftentimes than not during this season. So what you want to do is you might need to invest in a particular battery operated drill. You might need to invest in something that is battery operated that you can tap into during this period. Now, the investment of backup power sources, there are many different sources. It might not necessarily mean that you have to purchase a big generator based on your operation, but I will ask you to consider looking at your operations and how critical your operations are in terms of being functional during a disaster. Planning for adjusted operations in the event of loss of workforce. Now, that is a real scenario. During this period, persons are impacted. Your employees can be impacted, which means they cannot come out to the office. If you had an impact of a critical worker, what is your contingency plan? What will you do if you lose a critical member based on their not being able to come out, something happening at their home? So this is where you need to also look at what is your backup for this. And I'll speak a little bit more on this one as I go forward in the presentation as well. But it's just a thought that I want to leave you with here now in terms of losing your workforce or critical persons in your workforce. And most of the time for SMEs, it's not a large workforce. And in particular times, it might just be a local workforce that you may be working with. Now, developing remote work options in case the physical location is compromised. We have seen this already with the event of COVID. We have persons that would have utilized working from home. However, there may be some other businesses that you might be able to tap into during this season in terms of what if this occurs, where can I set up? Because I might not have the luxury of working from home based on the business operation. And lastly, but definitely not least, one of the critical points here is insurance that covers potential loss of or damage to your inventory or property. And it is both inventory and property. And in Mitchell's presentation, as he continues, you will see why we separated inventory and property and the reason you need to look at both areas. Continuity planning. In terms of a continuity plan, this is one that accounts for the actions that need to be taken for a business. And this would allow this business to resume operation as efficiently as possible following an unusual event. So in the event of a hurricane, in the event of a natural disaster, how will you continue to operate as efficiently as possible after this particular event? And some of the examples I have here is additional funds for emergency. This is one of the things that you must consider. What funds you need for emergency, and whether it is business or personal, we always look at keeping some funds on us for this reason. Repairs, the funds and the money that you would need for any repairs, the stock replenishment, because depending on your organization, we know before the disaster, persons will come and they will sweep the things off the shelf, especially if you're a mini mart, very, very quickly. So you need to look at how quickly then you could replenish your stock and have ready relationships with other businesses. Now, as SMEs, it's important that you not only rely on inward yourself, but for natural disasters, that you look to partner with other SMEs too, that you may be able to tap into during the season, because you would not want a situation to occur and you are not able to service your clients because you're down and you have to turn them away. But if you've built another relationship, especially during this season, you partner with another business that can, if something occurs, they can carry on the operation for you. They can handle your client for that period of time. Then at the end of it, you keep a client because they're able to see that you have the opportunity to survive during a disaster. And also the suppliers, how quickly you can recover after that, what suppliers you need, and how are these suppliers going to replenish your stock, and how quickly you can recover based on getting your goods back in. The remote working options, I would have mentioned that one briefly before in terms of what options you need to look at. Sometimes it might be that you need to rent a location just for an office desk and a space, if that's the type of operation that you have, or based on the operation you have, you may need to actually put some physical plant into that location for a period of time. It might also require, as we look at continuity, that all of your stock is not at one warehouse, because should that warehouse be compromised, then how are you going to start your business operations back, right? It might be a situation during the period that you may need to look at utilizing more than one option, and you might be able to work from another warehouse or another setup during the period. And then have alternative transportation for operations. And we would have looked at that briefly, where he spoke about making sure you have a shuttle service, you have contacts with these persons, and not only dependent on your own transportation, because we know things can happen that can prevent that. And during a natural disaster, and we would have seen some experiences with Elsa and others, it is very difficult to reach certain critical services because everyone is calling at that time. But if you already have your SLA and your contract set up with them, when you call them, you know that you will be answered based on the information that you put beforehand, so that you will be prepared to deal with any eventuality. Now, I'm just going to share a bit about ICBL. For persons on this call, you may or may not know that we carry one of the largest property portfolios on the island. And we definitely take pride in that in terms of property coverage. Best coverage for your insurance needs to mitigate against risk of natural disasters, because Mitchell will go into the detail of that coverage, so I wouldn't share on that now. We have been operating for more than 40 years with sound risk management advice and insurance coverage. We're the only composite insurance provider in Barbados writing business in all areas. So general, life, and investment products, property, PNC, all under one roof, all under one organization. So when you come into ICBL, you know that you are going to get an answer. You don't have to be transferred to another company or department, or no, we don't deal with general, we only deal with life. We deal with all areas here. So that is very important. So you know that your needs will be taken care of. And as you speak to our agents, that they would be able to advise you in every area as well. And we really pride ourselves on our customer and our customer satisfaction, and we appreciate the feedback and the expertise we deliver. So our customers are first, and we put our customers up front as we engage with you. So I just want to share a bit about the organization, because Mitchell is going to now go into a bit more about our products and the services and the protection against these assets.
Thank you, Maya. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here to present to you. Now, you've done everything to protect your business. You've put all the contingency plans in place, but there's an additional step that you can put in place as well to protect your property, the physical location of your property, of your business, the equipment that is important to running your business. And a policy that covers your business in its entirety is one where we call commercial fire and perils. This type of insurance is used to protect the owned or rented equipment and the property of your company. This coverage is extensive, but it can help you to, if there's a storm that has happened, you've made all your plans and you've done everything, but you have been impacted. This commercial fire and peril coverage helps you to replace the personal effects that were at your business, your tools and equipment, even your inventory, the things that your staff would have used to assist them in performing the tasks required in your organization. We use computers on a daily basis, laptops, and we have other electronic equipment that are fundamental to the function of your business. But something else that people don't ever take into consideration is the outdoor aspect of your property, the landscaping, and the fences that are associated with your business. These are things that will be covered under your commercial fire and perils policy, and will give you that peace of mind should an event happen. Yes, right. Should an event happen? So when you have this policy in place, it basically treats to or speaks to providing the owners of properties, such as the buildings, the stock, the plant, the machinery, even the office contents and other commercial property. There are circumstances or instances where you may have a storm, and in that storm, a fire occurs. We can think about some place like Grisette's Industrial Park. The circumstance might have been different. It might not have been influenced by a storm, but you're in the middle of the night. Most small businesses rent one, or most small businesses may operate from home or in an industrial park environment. And you're in the middle of the night and there's a storm, and in that storm, a fire occurs. You can't get to the location where you can secure your property. But once you have the commercial fire and perils coverage in place, then you have that assurance that your risk, your risk exposure would be covered. And you have to be clear with what you're covering, because if you do have coverage and you don't list everything in it, then and a claim occurs, the instance is that you may not have the necessary coverage to satisfy an element of your organization. So things happen. We have earthquakes, bushfires, and even explosions that may happen in terms of a storm and an event. So having commercial fire and peril coverage is important. But there's something else that is even more important. Maya spoke about business continuity. How do you get that business continuity? What do I need to have in place to have that business continuity? One product that you can have is something called business interruption. That business interruption protects your business in the event that it has been interrupted, and from one of the fire and perils that we would have mentioned earlier. And that protects you so that it caters for a reduction in your gross profit, any standing charges such as loans and other expenses, wages for your employees, because as a small business, wages are critical to satisfy your employees have families. And if you're not covered, that means then that wage component there's also an issue where you can't satisfy the needs of your employee at the point of suffering an incident. All right. So within that business interruptions coverage, you also have the fees covered for the investigation of the claim, and also the costs associated with that transition to a new location, because you might have had stock, or you might have put the contingency in place where you have stock, but your physical location is not, you can't function from that physical location. So you have to transition to somewhere else. The building that you're working from is damaged. So you go to another location. This this business interruption policy will assist you in these things, but you must also know that you can't have it on its own. It has to be purchased along with your commercial fire and perils policy. So yes, at minimum, the commercial fire and policy helps to protect your business. Without this coverage, we all don't have deep pockets. There's some people who may have deep pockets, but there are some of us who do not have deep pockets. And as a result, you will need that extra money to help restart your organization, to help move forward your organization. And therefore that that claim, instead of paying out of pocket to rebuild your building, the insurance company will assist you in that process. Okay. So no matter what industry you're in, property insurance can help protect your company and your organization. So that is one of the fundamental reasons why you need insurance. What are the key misconceptions? What are the myths that we normally have? When you set up a policy, one of the interesting things that you're gonna do is provide us with a stack of information that's relevant to your organization. And one of those pieces of information is something called a valuation report. That evaluation report will tell you, or give you a description, give us a description of the company, of the building, and the condition that is in. How many times do you need to submit this? Well, your property may change over the 3-year period, 3 to 5 years. You can submit a new valuation because your property would have increased in value. Addition to that, your contents. Your contents, is it covered? Property is covered, therefore contents is covered. If you're renting a building, the landlord is insuring his building. Therefore, it is incumbent upon you to have your property insured, your contents insured. All right. Is insurance necessary? You come back to the concept of self-insuring. If you have those funds, then it would be, I would say it isn't necessary, but can you afford not to use your funds to pay for the repairs? Insurance is very necessary in that manner because it helps you helps protect your financial position. Property insurance refers only to the building. No, it refers to, again, we mentioned the fence, the photovoltaic systems that may be attached to your roof. All right, so these are things that need to be considered. Your stock. When you submitted the valuation for your stock or the information for your stock, Maya would have mentioned earlier that you have to have your records and keep your records. If you submit a value for your stock and the values for that stock changed over time due to inflationary factors and you have not submitted that, then it is you will find that the claim, when you're assessing your claim, what your expectancy in terms of your fund or your payout might be slightly different in terms. Is insurance expensive? We can tailor our plans to cater to your needs, but you also have to keep in mind that as we tailor your plans to meet your needs, that you do not under-insure your properties, you don't under-insure your stock and your raw materials. Having adequate coverage is essential for any organization. So to ensure your premium cover is within acceptable market standards, what do you really need to do? What do you really need to know? In your valuation report, your assessor would look at the condition of your building. It will also ensure, if you look in depthly at if there are security cameras in place, there are hurricane shutters, because a lot of our buildings have lots of windows. We like lots of light, but during a storm, things are flying. Is your building protected? Is the internal aspect of your building protected from the flying objects? Are the roof straps in place so that if there is excess high winds, your roof is not removed, right? But in addition to that, you might have had security in place in your organization, all right? For fire detectors in place. Somebody might have been there during the storm. Hope not, but we need to have fire extinguishers and fire detectors in place so that we can help prevent the fires or help mitigate a significant issue if there is a fire on your property. on your property. So Maya would speak to the general information required for gaining insurance. Thank you.
Thank you too, Mitchell. Appreciate it. And in terms of now the general information that I know some of you may be asking about in terms of how, if I'm interested, my property is not insured or it is, and hearing what Mitchell would have shared in terms of at the right values to ensure the content is at the right value, etc. One of the key things are some of the basic things we ask for. So if you're looking into this area, one of the basic things we're going to ask you for is replacement value. Mitchell would have shared about that in terms of the valuation. What is the property currently valued at? We term that your sum insured, but it's really the replacement value of the particular property. If something had to happen and the entire property was damaged or what's not, what would it cost to replace this property? The construction of the building. In terms of the construction of the building, we're talking about things like, is it a concrete structure? Is it a wooden structure? Does it have galvanized? And those are the things that you will see in terms of the construction of the building. Location. And you may say location of the building. Yes, you want to know where the property is located for sure. And then there are some properties that are inland, or you might have a property that is right there by the beach side. So that is why we need to understand because we are assessing the risk, right? So we want to know that location of the property as well. What the building is used for. Is it a laundromat? Is it what type of services you have? Because based on the use of the building, which includes the occupation and the trade, it will let us know what type of equipment most likely will be stored within the building. I mentioned earlier, like a gas station, etc., will have flammable liquids, and those particular things will be located at that particular building. So we need to understand the use of the building. The nature of the inventory and the stock, that will cover then what are the things that we are insuring. If you're having your computer systems, your AC units, etc., what are the things that you are going to be covering in terms of stock and inventory, the ownership, and that's very important, who's the building owned by, and things like your certificate of incorporation or your certificate of registration will give us that type of information. If you are the sole proprietor and you're working from home, and you're thinking as I go through these things, but I don't have all this information because I'm actually just set up at home, we can also cover your home as well too, where you are working from. So information on the contents and equipment, I would have mentioned that as well. So as I spoke about the stock and the inventory, that inventory, the type of quantities that you would have in the building at any particular time, will cover those things in terms of stock, inventory, the type of inventory, clothing or jewelry, and what type of inventory you have there that will be shared, food, etc. The year the building was built and the condition of the building. And when I say the condition of the building, there are some persons that may have buildings and you own the property might not be currently utilized. So you can have an unoccupied building. So is this building occupied? Is it an occupied building? Do you have tenants? And what is the general condition of the building, right? So those are things. If it's an unoccupied building and you want to have it covered, because even if your building is unoccupied right now, it's up for rent, etc., we definitely want to make sure that you still have that building insured. And for sure, then things like security, you should be looking at, etc., and we'll ask about that, because if it's unoccupied, we know that that's a risk that we also need to mitigate against vandalism, etc. So the condition of the building we will ask about. So that's just to give you a general information. Of course, when you speak to an agent and you speak to one of our representatives, they will give more information in terms of to you on a one-to-one basis, but this is a general information as you look at that. And really excited about this one because we have partnered with the SBA, and I believe this is a great membership opportunity for those who are members of the SBA, that you will benefit from discounts with us at ICBL. And those discounts are on all types of services when you have up to 10%, up to 2 policies or more. And then the discount goes up if you have 15 or more policies with us. So we are really pleased with this initiative that we're able to partner with the SBA to bring value to their members. And know that you can contact us. I have our contact details here, my email address, Mitchell's email address. We also have Sherry Sobers, who's within the commercial team and works with the SBA special as well. And then on the call today, I know we have one of our underwriters, Tito, who has joined us as well. So we have Tito works with the broking unit. And for the brokers now, I know some of you will explore direct options, but some of you will utilize a broker. And we also work through your brokers as well. So we have teams set up that can assist and that could definitely work through ensuring that you have the right coverage for your needs and the various type of coverage, as you would have heard Mitchell mention, whether it's contents, whether it's the property, whether it's business interruption, that we have a solution that will meet any one of the needs to ensure that you can mitigate against any risk in the event of a natural disaster. So I really want to thank you for this opportunity and for the time that we had to present to you this morning. And I will hand over now to Dr. Holder. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much, colleagues. You've been hearing from Ms. Maya Wiltshire and Mr. Mitchell Robin Blaze from the ICBL as they share on how we can go about mitigating the risk of natural disasters, not only from the perspective of the product offerings of the ICBL, but from a very general perspective as well, relative to what our MSME sector needs to do, what we as a community needs to do relative to mitigating risk. We're going to get into our Q&A segment now, the remaining 15 minutes that we have. So I'm going to ask you to get your questions ready, get your comments ready, and begin to post in the chat. I already have a couple of questions here for our presenters, but I'm going to ask you now to please go to the chat section on the Zoom platform and type your queries in, your comments in. We're going to get to that in 30 seconds, but let's hear at this time from TJL Consulting. TJL Consulting, then we revert to our Q&A for our presenters.
We at TJL Consulting Services do offer a range of financial services which stem from accounting services such as with the record and bookkeeping, financial statement preparation for both monthly financials as well as year-end financials, accounts receivables management, financial budget preparation, financial projects, and forecasts. We also offer services in review engagements for assurance services, business consulting services such as change management and the business restructuring process. We also do provide internal audit consultations as well as AML checks and compliance checks. Do give us a call today at 241-7626 or send us an email at tjlconsultingsolutions@gmail.com to find out how we can help service your accounting and finance needs today.
Thank you very much. TJL Consulting, a range of accounting and financial services available to you business persons, and I believe at the individual level as well. Thank you very much. Let's get now to our question and answer segment. As I shared at the beginning, for those who may have joined us late, that we've been discussing today mitigating the risk of natural disasters. And we thought that we'll take a look at this from the perspective of the insurance provider today in our session. And so we want to hear now from you. So let's maybe go to our chat section and see what questions, what comments we have available for our presenters today. Now, Maya, there's always been a question of a deductible. You start out, partnering with that insurance provider, and you go through the process of valuing your property and all that. And somewhere along the line, there's in that fine print something about a deductible. That you have a 2% deductible, and when you think that you are covered for this particular sum, the insurance provider has now to, take that 2% as some deductible before you can actually benefit from the insurance protection. Tell us about this deductible. Why do we have this deductible? What is it really all about?
Yeah, so what I would share here in terms of deductible, Dr. Holder, that's an excellent question. And that is where what Mitchell would have presented on comes in key in terms of how you get the best premium and also how you assure to that your deductible is manageable. When we look at property, we want you to look at the things that you protect your property using those shutters, hurricane straps, making sure you have those things, because by having those things in place, it helps with the premium value. And even as we assess the property for the deductibles, because yes, before you are reimbursed in terms of the claim, there is a deductible that will be there. And it's important to read that policy extremely clearly so that when you work, and our team definitely make sure we go through it with you, even if it's direct. And if you're working with a broker, make sure you understand the deductible, because there is a portion that you have to pay first as well. And when you reach that amount, so say for instance, your deductible is $1,500 for a particular risk, you will, that once you send in your bills and you have met that requirement of the deductible, then the difference is what you will be reimbursed when the claim is assessed, right? Mitchell, I don't know if you want to add anything here, because Mitchell would definitely speak to our clients as well in terms of this area. And I know that he too would have seen as a valuer some, and that's another thing, doctor, because as a valuer, one of the things that we know that we see is persons might undervalue. And when you undervalue that property and the incident occurs, and then you pay your deductible, you're looking for this sum, but we are only looking at what the property was actually covered for. So I want to also add that there. But Mitchell, is there anything you want to add to give the opportunity as one of the specialists there?
Yes. The deductible is part of that shared cost, that shared expense that the policyholder will contribute to the policy. But additionally, the key to have the best premium, as you would have said, would be to make sure that you are real with the values that you submit to the insurance company, and then speak clearly to the affordability. But what is also important, so that there's no mystery, is that all parties explain in the entirety the contract to the client. The client is not an expert in insurance, and therefore we have to assume ignorance on their part and make sure that there are no mysteries.
All right. Well, let me ask a follow-up question to that then. Let's say that the property is valued, because Mitchell did speak to valuations before and the importance and significance of valuations. So the property is valued at $500,000, but the property owner wants to insure for a little bit more. They want to insure for $550,000, even though the valuation would be $500,000. Is that allowed?
Usually it is better to be more accurate in terms of your value. What will happen over time is that your property could depreciate, one. All right. But additional to that, there is also the appreciation in the property over time. So over insuring is not necessarily what will be happening, but the person is actually looking at saying, well, hey, the valuer might have said that my value is my 500,000, but I'm looking down the road and I'm seeing that the replacement cost for this could be more than 500,000. You have to know. The cost of concrete blocks have gone up. The cost of materials, construction materials, have gone up. And in the last year, if I did a valuation today, after COVID has struck, the cost of materials have gone up significantly. So you can see how that can impact the valuation and then the property owner's perception of where their value really should be, because they're thinking, well, hey, there is an influence here on in terms of what it would cost to really rebuild the structure. So it is not necessarily over insuring.
Yeah. Dr. Holder, to add to that, though, what I would say is, honestly, our underwriters will look at that one closely in terms of why the person wants to overvalue or property value that one. It would definitely be something that our underwriters will look at. For sure, it would raise alarm in insurance to say, your property, everybody's saying it's valued at 5, but somehow you want to take it up much higher. it will be something that our underwriters will have a conversation with on for sure. I can
they
tell
may
you
want to
insurance
protect
that would
themselves
happen.
against the deductible.
Correct. And that is what Mitchell was saying there. Mitchell alluded to it because they might say, well, I want to insure it because the concrete blocks. And that is really discussion and the dialogue comes, right? In terms of building out that policy and not just, this is what I want to do and send you a quote, but we like to have the dialogue. And that dialogue then opens for us to say, well, okay, we understand in this instance why this person wants to add additional 50K to the property, although it's valued at 500.
Right. Okay. All right. I have another question here from Faith Marie Bryan. Are there any circumstances in your view where it makes sense to have multiple policies?
For multiple policies, Mitchell, I was thinking in terms of multiple policies. If this, I'm interpreting this question to be multiple policies. You have a property insurance with ICBL, you have a property insurance with another provider, or the multiple policies in terms of property, business interruption, contents, all for the same property. That answer is a clear yes. But in terms of multiple property,
across different providers?
Yes, across different providers. I haven't seen that one, but I don't know if it's one that Mitchell would have seen and if they think there's a value. I know for health, persons definitely do it in the sector of health. For us, we do see persons have multiple health providers, insurance providers for health. But in PNC, Mitchell, I don't know if you can share on that one.
No. If I'm insuring, you insure your property with one provider. Just suppose there's a car involved, you insure your car with one provider because then that provider will treat to the exposure, not more than one. So that's the only type of situation where you should have one policy, but different types of insurance, then yes, but not multiple policies for one risk. Okay.
Well, Faith is satisfied with your response. Let me see if I can get in a few more before we break. Tsunami insurance, where's ICBL at relative to this? Because I mean, tsunamis now present another threat to us here in Barbados. So where's ICBL relative to tsunami insurance?
Great question, and that goes under our fire and peril as well. So the fire and peril that Mitchell would have spoken about, flooding, tsunamis, that will be covered under that coverage.
Okay. All right. I've often wondered, colleagues, about the building codes in Barbados. You know, this has been a topic in the public domain for a while. Not sure even as I sit here where we're at with building codes, but do you take this into consideration as an insurance provider when you are doing the assessment of a property? You know, is it that those buildings must meet a particular standard, whatever the building code is, at a minimum in order to access the insurance? Does it come into play in the valuing of the insurance coverage, etc.?
I am not but with the quality or the quality of the structure is very important. You may have a structure that is not in very good condition and it can be deemed uninsurable because it might collapse in another few days or collapse in a hurricane. So having our buildings constructed properly influences what kind of premium or what kind of coverage you can access. All right. Yes, everybody's accommodation, everybody's business is important to them. You might build a steel shed outside of your home to operate your business. But if this steel shed is not adequate in terms of its construction, or the building itself is not adequate in its construction, then when the assessment is done, this will be told to the property owner before any coverage is extended.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm seeing another question here. Can the location of a property affect your premium, seaside versus inland?
Definitely.
Most definitely.
Yes. So that's why when we went through in terms of the location, Why we'll ask? Because at the seaside, you are exposed now. The risk is actually higher at the seaside than when you're in inland property. There are actually some companies that would not insure seaside properties. So that's a fact, right? We insure seaside. So if they're by the seaside, we do the insurance and we cover there. So, but definitely it would impact the rates that you will see. So that's a great question in terms of your premium. Yes, it would impact on the rates.
So it actually pays to live in the country then?
Yes, it pays to live in the country after all.
But not any low-lying areas.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. We are out of time now, colleagues. We're just nearing 12 noon. As you know, our sessions run from 11 to 12. It's been a rather interesting conversation as we are here today, colleagues, from Ms. Maya Wiltshire, Vice President of Commercial Sales and Broker Engagement at ICBL, and Mr. Mitchell Robin Blaze. He is the Commercial Sales and Business Development Specialist. Let me remind you at this time that we have entered a partnership, if you will, with ICBL, as was seen in the very last slide in the presentation, that allows for a number of discounts, from the company on various insurance products. And as long as you're a member of the association, you present your membership card and you can access a range of discounts from the ICBL on a number of insurance product offerings. And we'll continue to remind you of this in our email blast and in our social media posts and the like, as well as let me put in a plug for the other industry partners across a number of other areas that we brought to you as well, to ensure that you can access relevant discounts at this time. And every discount counts, if I can say so, especially in these very challenging economic conditions. All right, so we want to thank you so much for being a part of the session. I'm going to remind you, please, to stay on for 5 to 7 minutes and complete that evaluation tool that is going to help us as we continue to assess our sessions. I want to thank you, Faith, for your comments, as well as Betty for really appreciating the session today. As I began, I'll close. This is the hurricane season. Let us not take anything for granted. We have, in my view, a lot of information out there to help you to mitigate against the storm. And insurance coverage is one of those ways that you can do so. So let us hear again from TJL Consultant as we close out our session today. Let me thank sincerely Ms. Wiltshire and Mr. Blaze from the ICBL for coming on and sharing with us at this time. Sincerely appreciate it. To you both.
We at TJL Consulting Services do offer a range of financial services which stem from accounting services such as with the record and bookkeeping, financial statement preparation for both monthly financials as well as year-end financials, accounts receivables management, financial budget preparation, financial projects, and forecasts. We also offer services in review engagements for assurance services, business consulting services such as change management and the business restructuring process. We also do provide internal audit consultations as well as AML checks or compliance checks. Do give us a call today at 241-7626 or send us an email at tjlconsultingsolutions@gmail.com to find out how we can help service your accounting and finance needs today.
Thank you again. Look out for our July webinar, when we bring a very special finance product that has been launched here for the MSME sector in the area of energy. We'll bring that to you for our July session. So look out for that, and please register when the information is posted. Once again, thank you, colleagues. Continue to be safe. God bless you all. See you next time. Bye-bye for now.